Welcome back to our Youth Week of Prayer. I hope you guys have had an amazing weekend. And today we have Paul Brown, our neighbouring pastor from the Hub, and continuing our talks on forgiveness and reconciliation. But before he does speak, I do want to remind you of our two exciting new announcements. The first one is that we do have a new email address. Thank you so much for sending in your prayer requests and your thoughts about how this week of prayer is going already. The email address is youth@stanboroughchurch.org if you want to continue sending in your thoughts. And our next one is all about a letter writing project for the elderly, where we're going to be writing letters for the lonely people in our community that are a bit shut in. So if you do want to write a letter, please send it to youth@stanboroughchurch.org. It can be typed, or if it is handwritten, make sure you scan it and send it in to us, and we will gladly pass on your messages. We can't wait to read them. And the key thing is, do not write your surname, because we want to keep these letters as confidential as possible. Can't wait to see what you write. See you guys soon. Let's turn it over to Pastor Paul Brown.
Hi, today I want to talk to you about forgiveness and reconciliation. Now, from the outset, I've got to tell you that I'm naturally not a very forgiving person. I'm very competitive and maybe a little angry, and I need to get my own back. But despite this, I just wanted you to know this text in the Bible, and then we're going to carry on talking. 2 Corinthians 5 verses 18b to 19 says that God has given us a ministry. And if today you're unsure of your purpose, unsure of your direction in all this coronavirus time, whatever else you do, God says in 2 Corinthians 5 that he wants us to be ministers of reconciliation. That is our number one job. Now, reconciliation from my notes is defined as a restoration of all friendly relationships, no hostility, all misunderstandings squashed. Now, I used to play basketball, and I remember one day I was playing basketball. It was very early on in my basketball career, and somebody came along and they got their elbow and smashed their elbow in the side of my mouth, and I lost 2 teeth. I remember lying on the floor, and as I was lying on the floor, the person came up to me and said, "Are we cool? Are we okay?" Now, as I was lying there in this moment, I was like, no, we're not cool. We're not okay. But then I came to my senses. He lifted me up, and to this day, he's one of the best of my friends. But I've got to tell you, my immediate reaction was, I'm going to knock your tooth out. My immediate reaction was karma. And this is the problem with Jesus. Jesus simply did not do karma. He goes around healing people in society. Society likes karma. Society likes an eye for an eye, and in my case, a tooth for a tooth. But Jesus turns up and he starts healing people. He starts messing with karma. I like karma. You like karma. But forgiveness has nothing to do with karma. I remember one day, one of my friends asked me, what book should I read? And I said, get a Bible. And she was in a little bit of trouble. And a few months later, she called me. I was in another country and she called me. And then she was like crying on the phone. I was like, what's the matter? What's the matter? And she said, I'm reading John 8 verses 1 to 11, which didn't make a major significance to me. But I wondered what made her cry. And what made her cry was she said, I've read John 8 so often, and I've never seen this in the Bible that I grew up with. And the story is simply the story, and you know the story. The story is simply of a woman who's about to be stoned, a woman who's about to be accused. And the story culminates at the end by Jesus turning around and saying to her, where are your accusers? And she looks up and she says, there aren't any. And Jesus says, I forgive you. Though society's not forgiving you, I'm going to forgive you. Go and sin no more. This is Jesus. Jesus is the one that is coming towards us. After all this, when you finish hearing this in your life, Jesus is the one that's coming towards us, and he's going, are we cool? Are we okay? Because he's willing to do everything possible for it to be cool, for it to be okay. Simon Wiesenthal, you may have heard of him, is a Nazi war crime hunter. He went all around the world hunting the criminals of the Nazi war. And he tells a story in his book, The Sunflower, of he was in the concentration camp, he was in the hospital, there was a Nazi guard that was about to die, and the guard calls him across and he says, listen, I need to speak to you. And so Simon sits beside his bed and the Nazi soldier begins to confess. He tells him a story. He tells him a story about how one day a group of him and his soldiers hoarded 300 Jews and Jewish men and their families into a petrol-filled house and set it alight. And while they set it alight, anybody that escaped for fun, they shot them. And now he's asking for forgiveness from Simon Wiesenthal. And the story simply goes that Simon Wiesenthal couldn't listen to this anymore, was not willing to listen to this man's confession, let alone give him forgiveness, and he walks away in silence. But this unforgiveness plagued Simon Wiesenthal. And so he wrote the book called The Sunflower once, and then he re-edited it, asking 46 prominent people, did he do the right thing in not forgiving? A lot of them said yes. A lot of them questioned it. But this unforgiveness haunted Simon Wiesenthal. Desmond Tutu, Archbishop Desmond Tutu, has a very different notion of forgiveness. Desmond Tutu in 1995 led the Truth and Reconciliation Commission in South Africa, where they were trying to have a process of healing, truth and reconciliation after the political abuse and oppression of apartheid. His theme is that the light of forgiveness is freeing. And through forgiveness, grace, and honest confession, healing can unwrap the blankets of darkness. Healing can make a difference. He actually calls forgiveness a spiritual balm. And healing is what he wanted for his country. He felt that healing was not outside of us, but it was something that came from God and was given to us. And it is a God difference that he will heal the country. Tutu also had this amazing notion, Desmond Tutu had this amazing notion that we were in this together, that the accuser and the victim were in this, that they were bonded by being creatures of God. My favourite song is a Bruce Springsteen song. I know you may not have heard of him, but Bruce Springsteen sings his song. Google it or YouTube it. It says this: I'll wait for you, and if I fall behind, wait for me. Imagine that. Imagine living a life where I wait for you, and if I fall behind, you will wait for me. The people, I know right now you're not in a congregation, you might be on the computer, but imagine your families and friends. Just imagine the people that you haven't forgiven or the people that you need to forgive. I have some very dysfunctional relationships in my family. I was brought up from the ages of 0 to 18 with a stepfather that didn't like me. And then I met my biological father, and I think he doesn't like me either. Maybe it's something about me. But there's a lot of unforgiveness and lots of forgiveness. But imagine the notion of within all of that is the notion that Jesus is asking us to wait for each other, to not just discard each other, not just to walk away from each other, but to bring each other together, that we are all ministers of reconciliation, because that is what is the uniqueness of the Christian faith. We have a chasing God, a God who sees, God who hears, and a God that's willing to rescue us. And he says for his sake, he's willing to give us forgiveness. He wants to give us forgiveness so he can communicate with us. He doesn't want there to be a gap. He doesn't want there to be a space between us. He wants us to be one. And in John 17:23, Jesus makes his prayer to his disciples and to the world. He says, I want you to be one, just as you and I, God, are one. Imagine that. Jesus is saying right now to all of us in this community that he wants us to be one. He wants us to be close. He wants us to be able to walk up to each other and go, are we cool? Are we okay? I just want to leave you with this thought. A teacher actually did a forgiveness project. And what she did, she asked all her students to actually go home and get some potatoes, some old potatoes, and put them in a bag and put them in a duffel bag. And she said, I want you to bring them to school. And so they brought them to school, and everybody knew that the people with the duffel bags were on a potato project. And she asked them to walk around with the potatoes for 3 weeks. And for 3 weeks they walked around with the potatoes. And as these potatoes smelt, they weren't allowed to take them off. They had to keep the potatoes on their backs, and it started to smell. And they started to go. It was only that. The other thing that was really annoying is that actually they were quite heavy. I don't know about you, but sometimes I go shopping and you put a bag in your back. It's quite heavy. They smelt. It was disgusting. And by the end of the experiment, a lot of people were like, I don't want to do this anymore, miss. Can we not do this anymore? Can we just let go? She went, yes. She said it was for 3 weeks, but anybody that came up to her and said, I want to be released, she said, yes, you can be released. You can be freed. You can be let go. You don't have to have this anymore. And that's what Jesus is doing for us in forgiveness and reconciliation. He wants you to know that he died for us, that he rose again for us, and he's lived for us. And so he's coming up to you right now, whatever's going on in your world, whatever dysfunction there is, he's walking up to you and he's simply going, listen, I know there are other relationships which are messed up, but are we cool? Are we okay? Thank you for your time.
Thank you so much, Pastor Paul Brown, for that message. Now we're going to hand it over to Carol and Lucas, where we're going to continue having fun. So stay tuned.
Hello! Thank you for participating on our week of prayer. For today's activity, we will need creativity. Maybe some materials such as paper, cardboard, pens, color pencils, paint, or any other type of material you want to use. The idea is that we create posters to share on our social networks with a special message. The posters could say, "Forgiveness costs Jesus everything, it's free to you." If you have any better idea for the poster, you can make them any way you like. You could also draw Jesus with other people with their arms wide open. Please share the posters you create with us by sending a photo to our email or sharing on Instagram with #YouthSPC and tagging at @StanboroughPC.